Hey guys, and welcome to Game Jammin'. Today I want to talk to you a little bit about what you need to do before you start your first competitive game. Now, you can see here that I've already played my competitive games, but if you are a beginner, you will have a note here saying you need to do your placement matches. So before you start your first placement match, let's talk about what you should do to prepare. So first, let's talk about our graphics settings. You'll notice here I've got it set to borderless window. That's because I've got two monitors. You can set the resolution to whatever fits your monitor well. Keep the field of view up to the top. Let's talk about the settings that you don't want to have. Make sure VSync is turned off, and same with triple buffering, though you can have reduced buffering on, and it has slight improvements for some people. There's a thing called display performance stats that will update the top left corner with different settings. It's really good to show your frame rate so you get an idea of how fast your frame rate is, and same with the ping. Sometimes if your ping is really high and you don't know it, it can cause the game to act a little funny. So you can modify these settings here, the advanced performance settings. There's also a limit FPS. I would recommend setting it up to custom and putting the limit to 300 to allow your computer to generate as many frames as possible. I'd also recommend turning to the low quality settings because that will allow the game to play at the fastest possible setting. Now, if you have a super graphics card, sure, feel free to turn it up. But what you'll notice a lot of the pros, they will keep the graphics quality down because the more FPS, generally the smoother the gameplay feels. There's not too much else without going into more detail, so I'll leave it at that. Next up is setting up our mouse and keyboard. Now, what I'd recommend is going to the practice range because that's a good place to play without anybody interrupting you. What's nice here is you can pick your character and then immediately go into the options here and take a look at the keyboard settings or the control settings. And there's tons of customizability. I think that's the word I'm looking for. But essentially you can pick first individual heroes to act differently, or you can give them all a universal. Now, there's lots of different tips here that we could go into, but we're going to leave it generic that I would recommend you spend a little bit of time in this to set up your preferred control scheme. And also note that not just the character abilities are important, you should also take a look at communicating with other heroes as another important thing to look at in the control. So do what you feel is best, but it's important to get a setup that you're comfortable with so that when you go into game, you're not fiddling with the controls, you're focusing on executing your attacks. So now that you're ready to go with your controls and your graphics settings, what I'd recommend to be playing a lot of is quick play. Now, quick play is not a perfect analog to competitive, but it's pretty close. It's going to give you the same 6v6. You're going to get to try out all the different maps, and you're going to have to work with your teammates. Now, it's not again, sometimes your teammates are going to troll and do other things, but you should be playing a lot of quick play so that you have a pretty good idea of how the game feels and what you should be doing as a team, and what you should be doing when working with players. I'm not going to go into too much strategy here. I would just say try out different heroes and make sure you're comfortable with at least 3 different heroes. You can get away with maining in this game, which maining just means playing one single hero. But I would recommend against it because it helps to have a little bit of diversity. And to not be stuck if 2 people are maining the same character. There's nothing worse than joining a match and finding out that the character you wanted to pick is taken, and then saying, oh no, I'm just stuck and I can't play anymore. That's no good. So I'd recommend 2 to 3 heroes at least. And if not more, but I wouldn't also go crazy and say you play whatever character, doesn't matter. Because generally you're going to find out that there's some characters you just do better with versus others. So now that you've played some quick play, it's a good idea to take a look at the arcade, and specifically I'd recommend the 3v3 mode. What I really like about the 3v3 mode is it will help you learn which characters counter which characters, and how to duel. Because sometimes when it's 6v6, you kind of just fire at the enemy, and you may not understand exactly what's working and what's not working. But in a 3v3, it really becomes clear what you can do good with and which characters you have issues fighting against. You'll see here I'm playing with a Roadhog, and I'll find out, okay, well in some situations he can work out, in other situations I should probably consider another hero. Look at me, and look, Anna's kicking my butt right now. So I'd highly recommend spending a good chunk of time in 3v3 until you feel comfortable playing your hero. It doesn't mean you have to be the greatest dueler, but you should be comfortable about working with a team toward the objective of killing enemies. There's also a few other modes to try out in the arcade, and they switch up depending on the given week. But I'd highly recommend checking them out. Playing 6v6 mystery heroes can be a lot of fun, and so are the other modes. So finally, let's talk about team chat and then blocking people. So the team chat button is over there in the top left corner. You just click that button, and if you've got a microphone set up, you should be able to hear. And even if you don't have a microphone set up, you can at least hear other players talking. Now, a lot of times you have good players and there's no issue, but if you have an issue, don't be afraid to report players. That's what the function is there for, along with the chat blocking, which you saw earlier. When I was clicking those bubbles on and off, that is turning off and on the chat function for those players. So I think it's really important that when you join a competitive game, there are going to be some players that troll, and there are going to be some players that are just toxic. So rather than putting up with the experience and just saying, oh, I need to deal with this because that's how competitive is, no, that's not how competitive should be. So don't be afraid to block people that are causing issues in chat and to report people that cause issues for you. So that's kind of it. I guess there isn't too much else without going into more detail. So this is the high-level guide for what you should do to get started. There's tons more topics to talk about. So what I'd really like to know from you guys is what questions do you have for me? Now, if you're an intermediate or expert player, this guide is definitely not for you because this is way too basic. However, if you are a beginner player and you made it through this so far, definitely let me know what your questions are down in the comments below, and I will do my best to help you out. On top of this, I also plan to do more in this series where we talk about different topics. So if you want to see more, make sure to click that subscribe button and give this a thumbs up if you like the content. If you don't like the content, I'm sorry. But anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!